Hello, welcome back to this series where I am programming an NES game live on Twitch from scratch. This is episode 149, now with 100% more beard. So, Friday I did a little impromptu stream where I just kind of walked through the project and just chatted with people kind of at length about what was going on, what my plans are. I'll recap that more briefly here. So I'm going to start working again on the game, streaming Mondays and Thursdays. I'm probably going to stick to 8, but we'll see. We'll see if 8 is good or if it's too early. I'd prefer to do it at 8 because then I don't have to worry. It's less likely that it will be super late when I get finished. Also, the plan is to fix a couple of bugs and then start working on implementing levels and get that done, and like really start fleshing out the game rather than messing with game engine implementation stuff, because I really would like to get that, yeah, just want to get that going and hopefully have something playable by the end of the year, and testable by the end of the year. But we'll see. I'm still not fully set back up. The audio is going to be maybe not as good because I'm using the webcam mic, but we'll get the real mic set up here. I've got my pop filter ready. I just didn't have time to set up the mic and the equipment for the mic, but we'll get that for the next one. Speaking of the next stream, hey, I equal Shane. It is fun. It is fun. Tedious sometimes, but fun. So yeah, so for the next one, I was saying Thursday, but it looks like just because of stuff going on this week, it's going to be Friday. I will obviously post on Twitter and whatnot to let folks know when stream will be. Pretty sure it will be Friday. So with that rambling out of the way, let's kind of jump back into what's going on. So when we last looked at this, the game was working, but we had this problem where I deliberately added a bunch of enemy emitters, and that caused this weird flashing issue with the sprite after a while. And so if you look at what's going on, oh, actually, that's no, okay. If you look at what's going on, we are doing cycling through the hardware sprites as expected, but the problem with the flickering seems to be specifically tied to when we fill up, when we reach the maximum number of hardware sprites, and then even as the enemies cycle out of existence, we are hitting a problem and it is causing this flicker. So let's first take a look at like what this behavior is as we get closer to it, because I want to see what's going on. I want to slow down the emulation here as we get closer to see if we can kind of understand what's going on with the ship update. So we can see that there's a weird situation where the ship disappears as it updates this hardware sprite, and then it skips it, then it does, I'm not sure what, and then it updates this hardware sprite, and then it's back to normal. That's what's causing the flickering that we're seeing here, because it's just blinking in and out of visibility, which we don't have normally. So there's something wrong in the sprite update routine that is causing this. So let's take a look at that. So This is copying the sprites. Where is it? So we have our code here that actually draws the sprites. This is where? This is in the main loop, so it sets up the memory for the sprites, and then once NMI occurs, we will see the actual update occur. So begin populating OEM data in memory. So the entity counter is 0. This is technically unnecessary, but that's fine. Sprite mem is 0. Sprite mem plus 1 is 4, so we're updating 400 with the sprite memory. So if we go back to this and bring up the memory editor, it is here, and you can actually, oh, that's, okay, yeah, so you can see it walking through and updating our mirror of the hardware sprites. Right, so that's the pointer we're setting up here. Sprite mem plus 1, y is 0, and then we're storing that into temp. And then entity start is, now do we actually populate this with anything anywhere? I don't remember. This is an old copy of the file. I should probably get rid of these, or at least move them out of the project, just so that we don't have to worry about the search finding them. These were copies that I had made when I was messing around with that drawing code to fix the code generation. So I have this code. This is all that. So this is just this. We declare it, and then we also load the value. So the value is going to be 0 most likely here, because, or it should be 0 at least the first time through. Let's see. Is this actually used anywhere anymore? I don't think this is. Is it draw entities or draw sprites? I think it's draw sprites now. That's the thing with being away from the code for such a long time. I believe it's just draw sprites, and I had renamed it because draw entities was confusing since we're no longer really using the entities and the sprites are different things. So let's move. Where is draw sprites, draw entities? That's in assets. Why is that in there? Draw entities. I must have moved them into there at some point. Oh, you know what? Maybe that was some output from the tool that we don't need right now. Okay. Or I doubt we ever actually needed it. It's okay, so then the one that's in the export, that's probably not needed too. All of this stuff can probably go away. Those files. There's all of this stuff that's in here. It's just like extra, probably from failed exports where it was not exporting to the right place. Let's move those there too. Okay, those are in the recycle bin, so that's fine for now. All right. So now we're down to, we have, okay, so draw sprites is the right thing. And what we were looking at was this entity start. And the idea with this was that as you cycle through drawing the different bits of the different sprites, right? You want to start at a different location. I mean, there are a couple of ways you could do it. You could just draw everything at a fixed location based on whatever hardware sprite slots you have free, right? And then what that means is that if you run out of, for example, hardware sprites on one line, because you can only have the 8 sprites per line, per scan line, that some sprites disappear. So as just kind of a simple implementation, what I had done was I had implemented that it rotates through. Although it's interesting to see, maybe it's not doing what I think it's doing, because if it were doing what I thought it would be doing, all of these should still get swapped over to these enemy sprite tiles at some point. Because, let's circle back for a second here. Let's reset the emulation. So what should be happening is it should be cycling through every hardware sprite, but instead it's just flipping them back and forth. Which, I mean, that technically sort of works. And if it adds, you see when it added the enemy sprite, now it's just kind of rotating just amongst those. But I originally thought the idea of what I was trying to do was that I was going to rotate them all through. So what you should be seeing is the player ship, for example, just kind of constantly scrolling through the hardware sprites, right? And that's obviously not happening. So let's take a look at why that is. And that might be a clue as to what's going on here. So we have entity start is what's setting that up for us. Initially it's going to be 0, so we're going to start right at the beginning of the hardware sprites, this 0 sprite. And for the player it's 4 tiles, so those 4 sprites. And then we're going to go into draw sprites. And then what is it going to do? Hope everybody is having a good evening. It was a good day here. A little bit busy, but good overall. So this is looking at the projectiles and it is drawing whatever projectiles there are. And then once it's done, it is doing entity start times 11. Why times 11? I think that's probably times the number of bytes in the OAM attribute for the sprites. Let's take a look. That's the thing. Sometimes comments are not helpful if they're stating the obvious. and I think I've mentioned this in another stream before, but when like someone I knew had code where, you know, they would write a equals 5, initialize a to 5. And it's like, okay, yeah, I get it, but why? Why is 5 important for a? You know, does 5 mean something? Is 5 arbitrary? Like, what's the point of... There's no point in writing initialize a to 5 because it's obvious and basically just consumes space on the page. It's probably just about as useful as having just this. Now, if you were to say like a is 5 because of the number of whatevers, then that's okay. Maybe you want to use a constant there, but so my comment here, not great. I mean, it explains what it's doing to calculate entity start times 11, but not why that is the case, like why we need that. So there's only 4 bytes for the entity start, sorry, for each OAM, for each sprite. So where did 11 come from? And so we're shifting it left 3 times, and then we're adding it to itself 3 times. So that's, for those of you not familiar, that's, you know, multiplying by 8, and then we're adding it 3 more times to get the times 11. But I'm still not clear on why. Why would 11 be necessary? And then, like, what are we actually doing with this? Load A. Check in sprite. Increment entity counter. Hey, how's it going, Deadeye? This is drawing all the sprite stuff. Hey, Matt. So what? Yeah, what is this doing? Oh, is this? Oh, okay. Okay, that explains what it's doing. Although it's a little bit backwards from what I was saying. So what it's doing is it's iterating through the list of the entities that I have in memory, and so like the ship is the first entity and the cloud is the second entity. And then what it'll do is after it's done, it will then say, okay, now the first entity we're going to use is the cloud, and then the next one is the ship, which is why you just get the back and forth, but not it cycling through the hardware. I guess that's okay. Yeah, we're just, I'm working on fixing this sprite bug, and then I'm going to start working on some levels, but we'll see how long that takes. So then the question becomes, okay, so the entity start then doesn't really apply. Doesn't really apply to the projectiles at all, right? Because is it actually being used for anything? Spawn point, get rid of that, draw sprites, that's this. Okay, so that's loading that into A, and then transfers A to X, and then, oh, it does matter. Okay, because for the projectiles, well, so that's interesting, because then that means that it does the same thing for the projectiles as it does for the main sprites. And I guess that's okay. So then the question becomes, how big are the projectile structures and how big are the entity structures? Because they're not the same size, I don't think. And that could be leading to this weirdness. So let's take a look. One, two, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is 11. So that's where that 11 comes from. But this is only 4. So this is kind of an issue, because that's going to mess up drawing. Drawing the projectiles is going to be messed up, because when we go to draw this, oh no, okay, so this is actually correct. That's why it only did it times 4. All right, so this comment is utter garbage. So what we're doing is we're setting up the offset into the projectiles based on entity start, because we're working in tandem for the projectiles and the entities, meaning that, like, we're going to start at entity 5 and projectile 5. There may not be that many things, but it will loop through the list and come back until it gets to entity start, or what the original entity start value was, and then it will stop trying to process the projectile or the sprite, and then increment entity start for the next time around. So for this, like I said, for projectiles it's only 4. That's why we're doing just the shift left twice. Projectiles currently are 4 bytes, so only ASL times 2. Okay, so that comment now is hopefully going to be more helpful for the next time we go into here and try to figure out what's going on. So then for this is correct, because the entities are offset by 11 for the main sprites that are separate from the projectiles. So we're going to come into here, we're going to draw, we're going to keep going until what? We're going to go until we get to the upper bound of the projectiles, and then we're going to reset X, and we're going to increment the entity counter, and then we're going to compare that to max projectiles. Okay, so we're not even looking at what entity start actually is. We're just saying, okay, we know how many projectiles we support, so once we've looped through that many projectiles, we're doing this reset here to 0. If we get to the maximum number of projectiles, then we're done, and it will end the scope. So that looks good. Branch equal done sprite, jump, draw. I think that looks fine. max projectiles, what does that actually equal to? 32 projectiles. Okay. Now, this doesn't deal with the maximum number of hardware sprites, so that's potentially an issue. In that, like, this is okay. Well, it's not even that. Like, the projectiles are technically, I think, all just one tile. The sprites are multiple, so it's possible that we run out of hardware sprites trying to draw the thing. That could also be the problem. In fact, that may ultimately be what's causing this, that we are not putting a bound on the hardware sprites. We're not checking what X is equal to each time we update a hardware sprite. That's probably what the issue is. And that would have to be something we would fix in the code generator for the export tool, because it is what's generating all of this code. So if we take this is multiplying by 11. Let's add a better comment here. We'll have to do this in the. Let's do this in the asset tool. Is that doing it in two places? Entity loop. Check temp to see if it's 0, because if it's non-zero, we've already determined our next entity start. Oh, is that the end of the loop? That's got to be, yeah, that comes later on in the code when we're processing the non-projectiles. So let's take a look at that. This first. So let's get rid of this. Or actually, we can leave this, but we can say something a little bit more useful. Like offset entity, offset into the entities based on entity struct size, which is 11. So that then generates that code to offset that we have here, where it does the shift and does the 3 adds. And then we say transfer A to X, clear out A, reset the counter. Yeah, so if you take a look at, for example, the player neutral, right, we are setting up 4 specific tiles for all of this, and it is not bothering to check to see if we are going to run out of tiles. So what will happen is, if this, for example, is 63, or no, sorry, not that one. If this is for tiles for the sprite 63, right? Whatever that value is, we'd have to figure out like how to determine what that is. But like, it's gonna write this, and then we're gonna increment y here, and we're gonna get a value that's out of bounds for our sprite mem, which is this stuff here. like all of this stuff here up to here, and what's going to happen is we're gonna end up seeing a write to this location at 500 is most likely. So let's add a watch here. Oh no, wait. It's not going to, because it's going to overflow, because that's going to be right. It's 60. It's 4 bytes. I don't even know. I don't need the calculator. It's going to be 256. So we're going to go back to 0. So we're going to go back to 0, which means we're going to actually update this first sprite with the wrong data. But I'd be curious to know if that is... I mean, we don't want to do that, but it's surprising to me that it's creating this problem afterwards, where once we overflow it, it is then causing the ship to flicker. Is it just a coincidence? Is it more that there's a bug with the code that's incrementing the start spot? Transfer X to A, clear carry, add the size of entity, compare, transfer A to X and compare. What does this do? Transfer X to A, clear carry, add carry, a size of that. Why is it adding? Compare X to U-bound sprite, branch if not equal. Otherwise it sets X to 0. That seems not right. X is just an offset into the sprite, or sorry, the entity. Oh, no, right. So it transfers that into A and then adds the offset into the next entity into A, transfers A to X, and compares it to U-bound entities. That part might be the... No, that's okay. That's size of entity times max entities. And so that's 11, and max entities is 15 hex, which is 21. Is that right? So that's under 255. So that would compute out. So if we hit the max size, then reset X to 0 to do what I was saying, where we loop back around, and then we increment the entity counter, and then check temp to see if it's 0, because if it's non-zero, we've already determined our next entity start. How do we do that? So 0 gets set to 0 there. So we never actually, we always do this. Temp is always going to be 0. unless there's some sort of weird issue. So if this is 0, then branch if not equal will not get called. We'll go into this and we'll load the entity type for the thing, and we'll see if it's a no sprite. And if it's a no sprite, we say done finding next start. Otherwise, we will. Oh, so we're incrementing temp there. Branch equal. Okay, so increment temp. Load a entity start, clear carry, add entity counter. That's weird. Check temp to see if it's 0, because if it's non-zero, we've already determined our next entity start. Load the entity type to make sure it's not an empty entity. If it's empty, then wait until the next loop. If it's non-empty, then increment temp so we don't do this again. But why? Why are we redoing it this way? Because, like, entity start is just an index into, you know, an array of these structs. Not the sprite mem, but the entities and projectiles. And wonder if this was me trying to figure out what the next thing is that we want to load. That's got to be it. I must have been writing this so that it was like, let's preemptively try and find. Let's preemptively try and find the thing that we're going to want to draw on the start of the next loop while we're looping through, so that we don't have to do that as a loop at the end of drawing sprites. But this is a little weird. So it would be 0, but if it were 0, 0 is not a good condition to check, because it could actually legitimately be 0, because like the player is in the 0 position fixed in the entity list. So like this is kind of, I'm not sure if it's dumb or if it was just I was tired that night when I wrote this or something. Increment the entity counter. Like here's what I would expect, right? We're loading the entity counter, we're comparing it to the max entities, and if it's equal, then we're done. Otherwise, we got to go back and draw more entities, assuming there are more entities to draw. So we're incrementing this, then we're loading temp to see, okay, do we need to set it to something? If it's 0, then we're going to say, okay, let's set it to something by taking the current sprite and seeing if it's a no sprite. If it's a no sprite, then it's no good. Otherwise, why do we increment temp? Oh, I guess because it's 0. And then we load entity start. This is the part that's confusing me right now. Load entity start, we add this entity counter to it, and then we store that in the entity start. Oh, are we just using this as a flag? We're just using this as a flag. So we're just basically saying if we haven't already found the thing that we're starting on, then we'll do it, and then we'll set this, we'll increment this so that we don't do it again until next time. So if we found something in this list, but I mean the first time through it's going to be the player sprite, right? So if we come in here, the thing we're looking at right now, oh well, no, okay, it won't be, because we go through, we draw the player sprite, and then we increment it to the next sprite, and we see, like, what is this thing? Okay, it's not no sprite, like there is something after the player sprite. It might be the cloud sprite, it might be an enemy sprite, whatever it is. And so then we say, okay, so we found it, so load the entity, get entity start, which in this case would be 0. We're going to clear carry and add the entity counter, which would just be 1. But then the next time through, let's see. The next time through, we would be on. We'd start on like the cloud, right? We've got that little cloud that floats by. That's in entity position 2, and that would. So we go into there, and then we'd say, okay, we haven't found our next sprite yet, and we look at the sprite that we're currently looking at, and it's no sprite. We're going to keep doing that over and over until we get to the player sprite again by looping around. Or no, are we even going to loop around? Yeah, the whole loop is going to keep happening until we get around to this, which then resets the index to 0. So then we find the player sprite, and we say, aha, this is not a no sprite, so let us take entity start and add entity counter. But in that case, we said we had 21 entities, and each, so we're gonna start at entity 1, and we're gonna loop all the way around back to the beginning, which is going to be essentially entity 20, right, on the entity counter, because we're going to draw the cloud, and then we're going to skip a bunch of entities because there's nothing there. We're going to go back to the beginning. We're going to get to the last one, and that's the player, and then we're going to say, okay, so that's our thing. So it was 1. Now add. It was 1. Add 20 to it. Now it's 21. And store that into entity start, and then we're going to compare that against the maximum entities. Right, and then if that's greater than the maximum entities, then we're going to subtract maximum entities to essentially make it 0. right? So all of this is essentially like a complicated modulo of 21, right? Because the next time around, let's say there's a third sprite after the cloud that we then try this with, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be the third thing. It's going to be all the way back to the beginning. And we're going to add the third thing and the counter. And then we're going to say, oh, if this is bigger than the max entities, possible maximum entities, then let's subtract maximum entities to get back to a range within 0 to max entities. That's what that's doing. So this is all very convoluted because it's got to be done by breaking it apart like this. The one thing that I am not 100% confident in, but we can test really easily, is if this is 21 and we compare this to 21, and it's just because I don't remember, because it's been a while since I've done this, so I don't remember what the flags will look like. Carry will be set because it did the subtraction, and so then this will subtract 21 and we'll get 0. And then if this is 22, we will get a carry. Oh, really? Oh, wait. Load A, 22, and then we do compare against 21. Oh, because, yeah, right. A is going to be bigger than. So wait a minute. Load A entity start. So if this is larger than this, then if this is larger than this, then carry is going to be set. If it's clear, then 21 was bigger. or equal to, right? Yeah, so carry will be clear if entity start was bigger than max, smaller than max entities, which is what we want it to be. Otherwise, we'll subtract. Okay, so that actually all looks, after all that rambling and trying to figure out what the heck I did here, that all looks okay. It could be more clear, but that looks okay. And then it just stores that after the subtract. Yeah, that's a good site for testing out stuff, just to make sure that you're thinking about it in the right way. I've used that a bunch. All right, so then we load counter, we compare it against max entities, which will tell us if we have gone through all of our entities, and if it's equal, we're done with the sprite. Otherwise, we'd go back to draw the entities. So that all that looks okay. So then how is it that we are running into this situation? Let's take a look. I want to look at the memory for the entities. Wherever they are. Hi. I'm going to show that to me here. No. Where are you? Enemy. Projectiles, objects. Objects? Wait a minute. So oh yeah, objects. Yeah. Okay. Forgot I renamed that. So it doesn't like that there. If I go to draw sprites, why don't you like that? It's not helpful if you won't do what I want you to do. Mr. Debugger. Oh, well, it's not going to hit that because it's not drawing that thing. Draw entities. Okay. Objects. And so why will it not show me the address of objects? Invalid expression. I won't show me that either. No. Huh. That is weird. Doesn't like projectiles either. It likes sprite mem. Alright, where is the address absolute? Where is it? What is that? Oh my goodness, what on earth is that? Ref. Oh, is that like all the references to it, I guess? Is that 500? That could make sense. Right? Segment RAM. That starts at CPU RAM. That starts at 500. Okay. Where sprite mem starts at 400. Yeah, you left your keys here? I didn't see any keys. Somebody left a Game Boy and a pair of headphones. No keys, though. Did you check the last place you had them? All right, so this is where the entity list is, and this is where the sprite list is. So the question, does this get overwritten? I don't think so. There's just so much going on the screen when this happens. You check the lost and found. So it's just drawing. So let's let it do its thing here. Let's go back to normal emulation speed. And we're getting close to the point where this is going to be. So I wonder if I need to, for my sanity here, if I should initialize any sprites or any entities that go out of scope to something, to not just have the no sprite, no entity definition, and actually have the FF00 stuff in there too, if I'm not doing that already, because like I can't tell. I mean, I guess I can tell that these are the valid ones because they're being used. You can see them updating. But like there's also, I don't know, maybe that's just a waste of time. But what's additionally weird here, now that I'm walking through this code and thinking about this, is you'll notice that I noticed that. Hey, Provoking a Storm, good to see you. Yeah, we'll be streaming regularly again, so you'll get to see me struggle with code on stream. Finally, kind of coming around to actually having time for it again. So yeah, so this is interesting. We don't start to see this happening like that's weird. The ship and the cloud don't really start to, or is it just happening too fast for it to update? Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah, it definitely is updating. Okay, so they're just swapping back and forth in these two positions. But once we get all of those other ship sprites in, it's like they don't go out of scope. And so the ship is continuing to juggle through the harbor. Like it should just be just the ship now. But something is making the code update more than just the ship. I am gonna, it looks like some of this stuff is initialized, some of it is not. Let me make the code actually clear this stuff out properly. Oh, it's supposed to be type. Okay, it's not doing it for everything, but let's clear out everything, because there's junk that's left over that's not being cleared out, and while it's probably not 100% necessary to do that, I also do want to be able to see if there's any sprite that's actually active that shouldn't be anymore. All right, so can you open the same file? You can. Haha. Okay, I thought I could. I know you can do this with other editors, but I couldn't remember if Visual Studio Code lets you do it. So what I wanted to do is see what we're not actually clearing. So the type is set to no entity. The X and Y positions are set to FF, so it's off screen, and if for some reason it's trying to draw it but shouldn't be, which it may actually be doing. Data and timer are being set to 0, but let's also clear out all these. So there's the X and Y velocity. We have the type being set. The Y world position can get cleared out too. Type, data, timer, and sprite. Oh, I wonder if that's the problem. If we're not clearing out the sprite, I mean, it shouldn't be, because I think it's looking at the type. Nah, that's just probably not good that we're not clearing it out. So, all right, let's rebuild this. Actually, technically, I don't even need to do this anymore, right? I think I can. Okay. Let's see what happens here. Oops. No, I'm not going to be able to see it in time. Okay, we didn't run out of... So those sprites are still technically active. Why? Interesting. That's not what I expected it to do. Let's make sure it reloaded the ROM properly, just in case. So we're going to run out here real quick. But what I want to see is I want to see the entities get cleared out as they go off screen. Ooh, that's what it's doing. Okay. No kidding. That was what the problem was. That it wasn't clearing... I guess that it wasn't clearing out the sprite type. But I thought... Oh, so this is... Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So... Well, that was dumb. I know why it happened, but it's still dumb. So, yeah. So this code is... This code is the problem, but it's one of those right answer, wrong reason situations, right? So what it is that at the point where we're trying to find the next sprite we want to start on, we are looking at the sprite type, and not the entity type. And what that means is that the reason this was a problem was because we weren't clearing out the sprites. So if they didn't immediately get overwritten by another sprite, this code would come in and say, hey, is this the thing we need to start at, by looking at the sprite and go, oh yeah, well, it's a real sprite. It's not no sprite, which technically is true, but if you look at the entity says that there's no entity there. So it's a sprite type that's been set, but not the entity. And so then you come through the loop, and the next time around in the loop, you just draw the thing. I guess it's trying to draw the thing that's there. Is it? It should be looking at the entity type, but I guess maybe it's not drawing it, but then it's still messing up the code, because the code is assuming that you're starting on a thing that is actually there. Let's take a look at this crazy nonsense here for a second. No. Oh, why? Why did I do that? I know why I did that, but that was stupid. So yeah, so it's exactly what I was saying. It's the fact that we weren't clearing up the sprite, but it's worse than that, because we're also in this loop, not even looking at the entity type. Which, for drawing the sprites, makes sense. It's like, okay, yeah, I don't need to do that because I'm just drawing sprites, but it shouldn't try to draw something that is that's not actually a valid entity. So it was basically going through and drawing. It's basically going through and drawing as long as the type is not no sprite. How do I feel about that? I'm annoyed about that because that's what introduced this bug. I'm further annoyed about that because the entities don't, the projectiles don't work that way. This should be that. So that's a bug. But that needs to be fixed. That needs to be fixed here. Except, is that a bug that I introduced by editing the code manually? Where does it generate the projectiles code? I can't imagine that I assume that it's just doing like %s plus. Yeah, entity list name. And entity list name is going to be either objects or projectiles. And then an entity struct. Yeah, here it is. That should be sprite. So that is why that's happening. So then the other question is, when we clear we clear object entity, clear projectile entity. We need to do the same thing here because now this is going to be broken too. Right. We need to set that to be cleared out because that's going to break now that we fixed the issue with it using type versus sprite, or vice versa. It was using type. We needed it to use sprite. I guess I'm okay with that. I mean, because at the end of the day, this is a sprite drawing routine. The entity type is used for processing the logic on the entity. We could add a check, but it feels redundant. Not that it's a huge deal, but just, yeah, we don't need to do that. So the only other thing is, like, I guess we don't need to add these additional clears. Really, we just need to clear these guys, this guy here. Very important. Remember to clear this always when destructing an object. Put a little comment here too. Okay. So I want to clear this up. I probably want to add something, just a little preamble here, just for next time I'm looking at this, trying to figure out what the heck I did. So that would be in here, and that would be in that loop part. So try to on the first as we loop on the first real sprite we hit, mark the starting position for the next NMI so that we can start at the next valid sprite. Temp is used as a flag to determine if we've found that next sprite. All right, so that'll give us a little bit of text here, so that I can be like, all right, that's what that's doing. I don't have to figure this out again. Super. All right, let's see how we're doing here now. Let's close this. There was, I believe, a bug still with entities not enemies not reloading after the first time around. So far this is looking good. We're not getting crazy flicker. The ship is not getting flickery. That's good too. Our entities are, our projectiles are firing. Now we're on the repeating section where we're just repeating these tiles. And then we should get back to the main map again here shortly. And then it doesn't seem to want to load. Yeah, so it's not loading the enemy spawn points again. One thing I also thought about for us to work on is I do want to be able to control the scroll speed, which we didn't add anything like that in the last time we were working on controlling things through the map. We did add the ability to export palette changes, which is pretty cool. So, and I'm pretty sure we messed around with that, where basically you just tell it, like, load this palette into palette 1 or whatever palette you want, so that you have the ability to change that on the fly. And I was thinking it'd be really cool to have some effects where, like, maybe there's a part of one of the levels where it's like sunset or something like that. What is this? What is this popping up in front of my application? And we can kind of change the colors as we fly to reflect that. Like, we choose more sort of, change the blues over to more purples and stuff like that. I think that'll be really cool. All in due time, not necessary right now. Let's get the map running here. So yeah, so we have these spawn points, and then, like I was saying, the one other thing I really want to be able to do that is more important is be able to specify the flight speed, because right now that's hard-coded in. So I want to be able to put points on the map where we can adjust the speed. I probably want to do that. I don't know if I want to do that as increments. Or if I want to do that as something like how much to slow down and for how much time, for how many frames. Like for these guys, we say, you can count, there are 5 of them over 300 frames, or sorry, and 300 frames between each spawn. Maybe we do the same thing where we say, slow down the speed. I forget what the speed value is right now, the scrolling. What is it? So right now it's doing it every Y position, decrement the Y position, load A, the Y position, decrement. Subtract C, subtract carry 1, blah, 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 blah. There's some sort of, oh yeah, camera counter, load a camera counter speed. That's, so right now it's doing it every frame. It just compares, it increments the camera counter and then compares it to the camera counter speed, and if they're equal, then it will move the camera, otherwise it won't. And if you change camera counter speed to, say, we'll have to change this so that it's not a constant like this anymore, but if we change it to like 10, then it only increments once every 10 frames, which means that it'll be much slower. And I've talked about before that, I want to be able to use different assets depending on the scroll speed. So like when you're way up high, the scroll speed will slow down, and then the as you get lower, the scroll speed will increase to help give that illusion of the speed of the ship over the ground. One thing that would be interesting to see is if the enemies will spawn if we do it at a much slower speed. but I don't want to subject you all to sitting here and watching this unless there are questions you want me to go through. What I really want to do is kind of look and see why the enemies aren't spawning. They should be based on the fact that we're never skipping, the camera is never skipping a position on the map. It's not incrementing by more than one, or decrementing by more than one. It's just what's happening is I'm changing how often it does that. So there is a limit to the speed, but you know, it looks pretty good, you know, based on even what we were messing around with before. Like, well, no, you didn't reload the ROM that time, did you, friend? Like, that scrolling speed is pretty fast. I feel like that's probably as fast as I would need the background to scroll. That requires a lot of assets to be available. Oh, that's also at the maximum. That's at maximum emulation. So let's try that again. That's the fastest it can scroll right now without skipping. Again, I feel like that's pretty decent. It's not, I guess maybe it could go faster, like maybe like that would be, maybe that would be what we want the maximum to be. But right now, for some reason, we're not getting our spawn things. Nobody's asking any questions. Let's take a quick look at what we've got here in this that is causing it not to. I bet I know what it is, but let's see what's going on to see if we can figure out what is happening with the code that checks to see if we need to load the object. So load object, load map object, add map object. Okay. So object confirmed is what gets called when we know that we found the thing that we're looking for on the map that says, yeah, we got to load this. So I'm wondering if what's happening, are we not resetting level object count? Like, is that all it is? Yeah, we're probably not. That would be pretty funny if that's all we need to do. I'd be okay with that. Skip row process, proceed with map render, process repeat scroll mode, set up new row, load new tile, populate single tile. After updating the index, blah, 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 top half. Where are we switching back to? So right now it's just flip-flopping back and forth between the repeat scroll mode, which just uses one meta tile over and over again, and the actual map processing. So let's see, background mode, repeat scroll. Okay, so that's repeat scroll. So I want you to do this here, and I want to load A0, store A, level object count. Level object count. Compare X to level object count. Oh, okay, no wait. Enemy index, that's what I need to set to, because what's happening is as we process through as we process through the map, right, and we look at, so it's been a while, and there are some new people watching, so I'll quickly talk about how the map works. So basically, as you go through the map, the code is trying to be efficient about how to load the enemies that are upcoming. So it knows that there's a spawn point here. It doesn't bother looking at any of the other spawn points. It's just waiting for the camera to hit the position where this spawn point is before it spawns it. And then it says, okay, go to the next enemy that we have to spawn on the map. So it's going to keep doing that. And then basically we're going to get to the point where there are no more enemies to spawn, but we're not, I don't think we're actually resetting the enemy index anywhere other than right here now that I added that. So what happens is when it swaps back to loading the map, instead of doing the repeat scrolling, obviously it doesn't load the enemies because it doesn't even bother checking for them anymore, because we've exceeded the number of enemies that are encoded into the map data, which means that there's nothing left to do. So that's why it doesn't spawn it. So let's see, that could just be it. So I'm very happy that these are all looking good. I learned about the term grazing from someone when it comes to shmups, which is that the sprite, the enemy bullet sprite, or I guess the enemy itself, overlaps with the player but not the bounding box, and you get extra points for that. That's a new one on me. I didn't know that that was a thing, but that's kind of cool. Yeah, there we go. And then, no. Okay, cool. So there was a little bit of, the reason I brought that up was because there was a little bit of overlap with the enemies here. The bounding boxes didn't quite line up. Not there. I didn't do it there. I don't know how you would do that effectively without like having two bounding boxes, like a wider bounding box. I don't know. That is a good question of like what would be involved in checking to see, because the collision is pretty decent in this, but I mean it's just a bounding box. There's nothing really crazy or special about how that all works. So yeah, I don't know. But we are at an hour and a half, and I fixed the two things that I wanted to fix, so that's cool. Do we have any questions here on anything that we did tonight, or anything related to NES programming? I mean, there are going to be a few people here that probably know more than I do, so I don't expect they have any questions. But yeah, if you have any questions, we can do that real quick, and then if not, I will wrap up. I'll post the recording, and then I will keep you guys in the loop on if it's going to be Thursday or Friday. It's probably going to be Friday, because, you know, why not start off streaming again strong by, you know, incorrectly scheduling the next stream. But just stuff is coming up, so Thursday is just probably not going to work for me, and we'll do Friday. I was thinking about doing Wednesday, but I feel like there's something going on Wednesday, and also EC Myers streams on Wednesdays. And if you haven't checked out his streams, he streams on YouTube, but he's got a great channel. He goes through, he's doing NES Alphanumeric, where he's streaming through A to Z of the NES library, and it's really fun to watch him play because he's really good, and he is just a genuinely nice person. and so you should definitely check him out at EC Myers Vids. I did not want to overlap with his stream because I actually want to watch it this week. I haven't been able to tune in a while and actually like watch and participate in the stream. So I don't see any questions in the chat, but that's okay. So, oh, what's going on with my Stream Deck here? Okay, that's weird, but we'll get these weird things ironed out here. As always, thank you for watching. If you'd like to reach out to me with questions, feel free to do so. I'm on Twitter at Clearvis. You can comment on the video that's posted on YouTube. I record all of these, and I've been getting a lot of questions recently, and ever since kind of stopping when my son was born, and I try to answer those as quickly as I can. I am very behind on the Zero Pages videos. I'm sorry, they're just a lot of work. I explained on Friday how much work they are. If you've ever edited video, you know how time consuming they are. But anyway, you can find me on Discord. I am my main username is Clearvis, but I am on Video Game Sage as Xelius, Xelius. You can also email me at xelius@gmail.com if you have any questions. You want to just email me privately instead of posting it publicly. I do have a Patreon and buy me a coffee. That stuff is posted in the video on YouTube. If you feel like doing it, I don't know. I did it because people kept asking me, and I appreciate that people want to support these videos. Totally not necessary. I'm doing this just to keep a running record. But I definitely appreciate it. And then also, if you want to do a pre-order of the game, there's a link in the videos. It's on itch.io, and that will get you access to the engine code, but not the assets of the game as I'm working on it. And then eventually, after the game is released as a physical copy, and probably about a year after it's been released, I will make all the code and all the assets available so that people can take a look at it and see how all of these many hours of videos translated into that game. But that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'm feeling good about this. I'm happy to be back, and I will see you all on the next stream. Have a good one.